Good morning and welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could join us. We are here today with Ethan Strimling, the former mayor of Portland, a former Democratic state senator, and Phil Harriman, former Republican state senator. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Lots going on, so let's get to it. Big changes this week in COVID restrictions in Maine, including the elimination of the outdoor mask mandate, something people have been waiting for. And Maine's Revenue Forecasting Committee projects that state revenues will exceed pre-pandemic levels for the rest of this fiscal year and the next fiscal year. And though Congress gets much of the credit for the economic boost, Ethan, what's the political impact for Governor Mills?
Very good. Look, a good economy means a very good chance of re-election, and clearly our economy is starting to move in the right direction. And you're absolutely right to point out that, you know, the reason that our economy is beginning to do so well is both because of how well our government has functioned in terms of getting vaccines out, but also in terms of the economic injection that they put into the economy to help create jobs and to begin to really put families and their well-being first. So we're expecting to see very good growth continuing throughout the entire year, and hopefully Congress will stay on that task. But yeah, if the economy stays like this, it'll be very good news for Janet Mills. It'll be very good news for any incumbent in 2022.
What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I think Ethan's got that analysis just right. This money coming out of Washington is filtering into the economy, into the checkbooks, into the income tax system, the sales tax system. That is a great trampoline for any politician to jump off of in an election year. And the fact that it's forecasted to go through this fiscal year and next means that the challenges that will be faced in the future when these revenues have dissipated will be falling on the next group of legislators who get elected.
Now, something that could be problematic for Governor Mills politically is that fishermen, lobster fishermen in particular, are rallying this past week once again against offshore wind development projects.
I've been asked to come here today to speak on behalf of the Vinyl Haven Select Board.
The governor has tried to reassure fishermen by proposing a 10-year moratorium on wind turbines inside state waters. That means within 3 miles of shore, where she says most lobstering is done. Fishermen, however, remain skeptical.
They're trying to put an industrialized piece of machinery out in the middle of the ocean that they don't really know what it's going to do.
And that's a big voting block. How big of a political problem is this going to be for Governor Mills? Phil?
Well, I think if she can assure them that it's 3 miles and further out, she can weather this storm. But I think the skepticism is that the politicians are promising one thing, look out, it may be just the opposite. And I think if she stays steadfast to that promise, this will blow offshore, so to speak.
Good analogies you're using there. I like that. Look, this is one of those issues that often come up when we're trying to balance environmental issues with jobs issues. But if we don't get serious about climate change, and offshore wind is part of that conversation, nothing else really matters. I have confidence that the governor is going to be able to make sure that we protect jobs on our waterfront, protects jobs in the lobstering industry. Look, Portland has a remarkably strong lobstering industry. It's something we work very hard to protect, but we can't protect one industry at the expense of the planet. So I think she's working hard to find the right balance. And I think that people understand that and they respect it.
Well, there's a push in Augusta this past week to abolish qualified immunity for law enforcement officers. Backers say it's about accountability. Police officers argue that they shouldn't have to worry about frivolous personal lawsuits over how they do this job. Ethan, how do you think this is going to shake out?
I don't know how it's going to shake out, but look, we have to hold cops accountable, and not simply because anybody should be held accountable when they violate somebody's civil rights, no matter who they are, but also to be able to build more trust. The conversations right now are about whether or not to defund police departments. That's because of the lack of trust that exists out there, because cops are not held accountable. You know, we had huge celebrations across the country when Derek Chauvin was found guilty. That wasn't simply because he was found guilty. It's because it's so rare in this country that a police officer is held accountable for their behavior. So finding a way to limit qualified immunity is a very important part of making sure we can rebuild that trust.
You know, there's a fine line between rebuilding the trust and losing the profession completely with people who don't want to put their personal assets at risk for making a split-second decision in a dangerous situation or in an environment where there are so many competing distractions, whether it's darkness and sound and so forth. That we have to trust that police officers, well, we all agree, need to be trained to approach things differently than what we saw in Minneapolis. But to say we're now going to take away their qualified immunity in a dangerous situation is going too far. I hope the legislature can find a balance that meets both needs.
But Phil, the personal financial liability, that's a red herring. In virtually every contract across the country negotiated by unions and police departments, it's the local government that will ultimately be the one that's responsible, which is the way it should be. Make sure your people are trained well, and if they violate the civil rights of somebody, then you're going to have to pay. So it's partly on your responsibility. So that's really a red herring in this fight.
Nurses at Maine Medical Center, the state's largest hospital, have voted to unionize. It comes just a couple weeks after workers at the Portland Museum of Art did the same. Union membership in Maine grew by 19% in 2020. That's the biggest increase in decades. Phil, what's going on here?
Well, it's an indication that the worker feels like they're not being heard or understood. It's also an indication that management is not living up to best practices. Why would you want to unionize if your relationship with management is a two-way street? This is clearly a signal for businesses, particularly institutional type businesses, to pay more attention to your workers, or you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to collectively bargain with a union for your workforce.
Yeah, Phil's got that right. I think workers are recognizing also that the way they've been managed over the years isn't working. There's clearly is a flaw within systems around that. With your management company, you need to look in the mirror. But I also think that workers are recognizing that income inequality in this country has just gotten absolutely out of control. It has been going in this direction for decades, really since the Reagan era when we began to reform our tax code. And I think workers are starting to say, look, we need to get our fair share. We are the reason that wealth is created, whether it's the workers at the Portland Museum of Art or Preble Street in Portland or over now at the nurses. We're starting to see workers say, you know what, we need to make sure that we're getting our fair share and that the people we serve are being served to the best of our abilities.
Maine will still have 2 congressional seats following census reapportionment. Our population grew by only about 2.6%, maybe 35,000 people. That badly trails the United States as a whole. The 1st district may lose a few towns to make up for a population decline in the 2nd congressional district. Phil, are we likely to see more Democratic voters shifted into CD2?
Oh, this is the dance that Ethan and I know well. When you have to redraw district lines for either the Maine legislature or congressional seats, there is an arm wrestling goes on to the incumbent obviously wants to keep party affiliation in their district and let those not affiliated with their party move to the other district. In this case, we have 2 Democrat congressmen and women. It's going to be interesting to see how that line gets drawn.
You have to assume, Ethan, that the Democrats would love to have more votes in the CD2.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it will happen. When I was in the legislature and we did redistricting, we actually ended up going to the Supreme Court because it got so clashed. We were so tightly divided, 18-17. One of the things that'll be very interesting to see, because this came up actually in the 2000 and whatever it was, 4 or 6 redistricting. Shelley Pingree lives right on the edge of the 1st district in North Haven. And there was one map that came out that actually had North Haven go up into the 2nd CD. I don't think that'll happen, but that's always an interesting, how far is that little map going to go like this in order to keep that North Haven in there for Shelley? But I do think there will be more 2nd CD Democrats, and that will be good for us for sure.
Of course, you don't have to live in the district, do you?
No. You don't have to, but it's a good idea. And,
it's a good
I don't think it would be a problem. I'm sure that Shelley would be able to find a way to still represent the district as well as she does.
Would be interesting. Turning to Washington, President Biden is looking to restore the era of big government, proposing $6 trillion in spending in his first 100 days. Clearly, it's go big or go home. Ethan, what do you make of his approach?
Well, I'm going to push back on your description of big government, because I think that's sort of a conservative framing. Ronald Reagan, who really used that framing successfully, created the biggest government we'd ever had. He just redirected the priorities. And that's what Joe Biden is doing. He's redirecting our priorities, redirecting our spending to get it more towards the working class, towards families, towards rebuilding our economy. And it is a long time coming. As I talked about earlier, economic inequality in this country is brutal. Making sure that families can afford college, making sure that they get the childcare that they need, making sure that small businesses have the resources to create the jobs that all of us need to be able to have the kind of life we want to live. That's what Joe Biden's doing. He's redirecting resources to the folks who need it most. Thank God.
Phil?
Pat, I want to support the premise of your question about the era of big government, because Bill Clinton said when he was president, the era of big government is over. We are multiple times larger than when Bill Clinton was president, and $6 trillion of new debt offset by what appears to be a significant amount of tax increases that Biden wants to impose. In my view, it probably does a lot of good in the short run, like we've talked about here in the state of Maine in the budget process. But at some point, these dollars have to be repaid, and that's going to come at a significant cost.
President Biden has some other
increases-
ideas about raising money, which I want to get to, and that's that he wants $80 billion to fund enhanced IRS enforcement of high earners to help pay for his plans. Senator Angus King, for example, says it's a common sense move because America's leaving hundreds of billions of dollars in tax money on the table each year because the IRS doesn't have the resources to go after wealthy tax cheats, Ethan.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because that's very important. There are so many loopholes in our tax code that have been created by Ronald Reagan, by George Bush's tax cuts back in the 2000s, then by Donald Trump's. So remember, Phil, when you say that these are new taxes, they're not. These are taxes that used to be in place that were cut for folks that we are simply restoring to be able to make sure that our deficit doesn't get blown out, something that you talk about quite a bit, to be responsible about our spending, which is how Democrats often do it. Republicans will just go forward and do all these tax cuts and not pay for them, and our deficit balloons. What Democrats are trying to do is get the money from the folks who can afford it and making sure that we rebuild our economy so working class families can survive. That's a good thing.
So I look at it very differently, Pat and Ethan. I look at it and say to myself, what Ethan describes as a loophole was a piece of legislation that Congress, House and Senate voted for. And if you're going to turn around and say it's now a loophole, then what you're basically saying is we curried favor to get votes. And now that we got the votes, we want to take it away. Why don't we just have a relatively simple tax system, regardless of where you are in the economic spectrum? Here's the income tax rate. Here's what you need to pay. Put your tax return on one page. And then we all say we're paying our fair share relative to the amount of income that we have.
All right. Jared Golden is one of 80 congressmen looking to lower Medicare eligibility from 65 to 60. They also want some other changes in the program, including more coverage for dental, vision, and hearing to be paid for with savings generated by negotiating down the cost of prescription drugs. Phil, what do you make of it? Is this a push to Medicare for all by Jared?
Oh yeah, for sure. I didn't see this one coming. I think the implications that we're somehow going to make healthcare accessible and affordable to people 60 and older, and we're going to do it by negotiating prices for prescription drugs. I've been hearing that tune since Angus King and Shelley Pingree and I served together in the Maine legislature to get the control of prescription drug prices. Here we are 20-something years later, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah, this is a great one. I look at, like Phil said, this is like schizophrenia up there. First, he votes against the stimulus package, and I'm ready to dump him because what are you doing? And then the next minute, he votes, for something that can expand Medicare, which is one of the best things we could possibly do for our healthcare system. So I'm back on board. I'm in. All right, this is good. I'm glad. Thank you, Jared. But expanding Medicare is one thing that we absolutely positively should do. Get it down to 60, get it down to 55. Do it for everybody. It's the most efficient system, and it works the best. Other countries do it. Let's get it done.
Let's wrap up with our winners and losers in politics this week. Phil, we'll go with you.
The loser this week is the president's proposal that somehow by raising taxes and hiring IRS agents is going to make the books balance. I just think that's great rhetoric, but not good math. My winner of the week is the Portland Symphony Orchestra. The Portland Symphony Orchestra granted a wish child named Sarah a cello that she was hoping for, and an invitation to play with them when they finally can play in person again.
Nice. Thank you.
Very nice. Nice little shout out for Portland. Always appreciated, buddy. I don't have one for Yarmouth this week, but I'll try to do that next time. All right. But I do. My winner of the week right near you is the students in Falmouth, who are finally getting rid of that absurd mascot that they had there, the Yachtsmen. So I'm very pleased to see that Falmouth has gotten rid of that, both because the name is sexist and also because it's elitist. So good for them for that. My loser of the week, Rudy Giuliani. Boy, they're coming in and they're just searching through his papers. My hope is because of how selfish and how self-absorbed he is, he will flip and give them everything they need on Donald Trump, baby, because that's going to be the big day.
All right. That is going to do it for Political Brew for this week. Just in the nick of time. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.